We've obviously seen the very visible and visceral reaction from markets to US policies, but it's very interesting to see from the consumer side what impact it's having. And these little acts of activism from consumers who have decided to turn their back on certain US products.
In early July, while US supermarkets hung discount signs, beef shelves remained eerily empty. At the same time, the Canadian Parliament quietly passed a bill that could reshape the entire landscape of North American agricultural trade. No heated debates, no threats of retaliation, just a single clause in Bill C-202. Reject food products from countries posing food security risks. And with that, Canada effectively closed its doors to US beef imports. Why did Canada choose this moment to turn its back on its largest trading partner? And what's really happening behind the tariffs and legislative language? Following the US decision to impose a 35% tariff on Canadian agricultural goods, the Canadian Parliament moved swiftly to pass Bill C-202, granting the government the authority to reject food imports from countries deemed risky to national food security. The US became the first country subject to the new law. To many, this may sound like a high-level policy matter, but in reality, it affects everyday meals in Canadian households. According to major supermarket chains, the disruption in US supply could push the price of imported beef in Canada up by 5% to 8%, with some regions potentially seeing increases of up to 10% in the coming months. A package of steak that used to cost around 18 Canadian dollars could now reach 20 to 21 Canadian dollars. Especially in provinces farther from urban centers like Saskatchewan or Newfoundland, for a family of 4 consuming beef 2 to 3 times a week, that's an added 30 to 40 Canadian dollars per month. A significant burden as inflation continues to linger. As the US was effectively sidelined, Mexico quickly emerged as Canada's new main source of beef. Mexican exporters have complied with Canada's strict food safety requirements, including clear slaughter dates, inspection seals, and batch numbers as per CFIA standards. However, concerns still linger from earlier this year, when the US suspended Mexican beef imports due to fears of screwworm infestations. Although Canada has not imposed a ban, consumer confidence remains shaky. If trust in Mexican beef doesn't fully recover, certain consumer groups, especially seniors and families with young children, may shift toward chicken or pork. As a result, prepackaged beef prices in urban supermarkets could rise by another 3% to 5%. While restaurants may need to adjust menus or increase beef dish prices by $2 to $3 per portion to cover input costs. Beyond the import shift, Canada is also accelerating efforts to expand beef exports beyond the US. Since 2022, the country has aimed to reduce its agricultural trade reliance on the US to below 40% by 2027. Currently, the Port of Vancouver-Fraser is undergoing a 3.5 billion Canadian dollars expansion project, the Roberts Bank Terminal 2. Once completed, it is expected to boost container capacity by 50% to 70%, enabling greater export volumes to China, the EU, Brazil, and the Middle East. Meanwhile, Canada is negotiating new agricultural trade incentives with China following a WTO dispute. At the same time, exports to Brazil have grown approximately 10% in 2024, with many newly approved agricultural and seafood products entering the market. In contrast, the US beef industry is facing a paradox. Supermarket prices have hit record highs, $11 per pound for steak, but unsold inventory continues to pile up. Many processing plants are being forced to shut down due to lack of demand. Between 3,000 and 5,000 workers at major meat companies like Tyson, Butterball, and Boar's Head have already lost their jobs. Additionally, more than 1,500 container truck drivers at ports like Los Angeles and Long Beach have been impacted due to reduced cargo volumes. Canada is making bold economic moves as US trade policies trigger a wave of responses. Could these changes quietly reshape what Americans buy and how much they pay? In 2024, the Trump administration imposed a 50% tariff on imported aluminum to protect US metal industries. According to the US Census Bureau, prices of aluminum products rose 22% within months. This hit American manufacturers and construction firms hard, especially those reliant on imports. Canada, which supplies over 70% of North America's aluminum, responded strongly. Aluminerie Alouette in Quebec announced a $1.1 billion plant modernization, powered by low-cost clean energy from hydro, Quebec. Quebec's economy minister stated, "The U.S. depends on U.S. for aluminum, and we won't stand by." For Americans, the effects are immediate. The price surge affects home renovation, auto repair, and beverage packaging. Costs on products like soda cans and appliances may rise, adding up to $2.5 billion annually for U.S. consumers. Small businesses in construction and manufacturing face tighter margins and difficult decisions. Canada is rapidly diversifying trade. In early 2024, non-U.S. exports rose 18%, while U.S. bound exports fell to their lowest since the pandemic. Gold exports to the UK jumped over 30%. Crude oil to Singapore hit records, and Italian imports of Canadian aluminum and pharmaceuticals reached all-time highs. Pork exports to Japan rose 13%, with Canadian food favored for its clean, traceable image. As Canada looks beyond the US, American buyers risk losing access to key supplies, from metals to pharma ingredients, weakening supply chains, raising costs, and reducing product availability. U.S. consumers may face higher prices or longer wait times for top-quality goods. Canada's Industry Minister Melanie Joly criticized the Trump administration's trade tactics, saying, "We are in a tariff war, and negotiating with the U.S. is tougher than ever." She announced a three-point response: stronger anti-dumping rules, better liquidity support for industry, and faster project approvals, cut from 5 years to 2. Joly also introduced incentives to attract top researchers, noting Canada welcomes talent, especially as academic freedom faces challenges in the U.S. Canada's assertive approach may heighten competition for talent and investment. U.S. universities and tech industries risk a brain drain as researchers and students OPT for Canada's more supportive environment. This could affect American innovation and growth in tech, biotech, and energy. Canada is investing heavily in green energy, hydro, hydrogen, and advanced fuels to lead the global energy shift. High-value exports like battery tech, advanced materials, and aerospace are priorities. The goal? Commercial independence and freedom from Washington's changing moods. If Canada becomes a clean tech and export leader, U.S. industries could lose a key supplier and tech partner. That could mean tougher competition, reduced influence in North America, and, for consumers, fewer options, and higher costs for next-gen products like EVs and energy-efficient appliances.
With them, and we're going to be doing very severe tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. Tariffs at about 100%. You'd call them secondary tariffs. You know what that means.
Ultimatum, concessions, and a brewing crisis? You turn on the TV and hear that the U.S. is preparing to impose a 100% tariff not just on Russia, but on any country still trading with Russia. Then you learn that Washington quietly allowed NVIDIA to resume AI chip shipments to China. Meanwhile, Japanese bonds are plunging, and Toyota prices are expected to rise. Is America now caught between three major pressures, and is each move carrying its own price? President Trump has given Russia a 50-day deadline to reach a peace deal with Ukraine. If that doesn't happen, he says the U.S. will apply a 100% tariff not just on Russian goods, but also on goods from countries that continue to trade with Russia, what are known as secondary tariffs. In addition, Congress is advancing a bipartisan bill that would slap a 500% tax on any service linked to Russia. For everyday Americans, this could stir up real changes in energy and industrial prices. If countries like India or China keep buying Russian oil or gas, and the U.S. starts taxing their exports in response, that could make everything from gasoline to electricity to construction materials more expensive. A 5 to 10% price hike may not sound huge at first, but it could add $10 to $20 to your power bill, or bump up prices on steel-based products you use every day like appliances, tools, or building materials after months of tight export restrictions. The US has quietly approved NVIDIA to apply for licenses to ship its H20 AI chips to China again. For many in the tech world, this signals that Washington may be reconsidering its stance, partly due to pressure from industry leaders, and partly because China's economic numbers are still strong. In the second quarter, China's GDP grew by 5.2%, and industrial production rose 6.8%, proving that its tech and manufacturing sectors remain robust. This move could benefit American consumers if NVIDIA ramps up chip production for both US and Chinese markets. Unit costs could drop. For example, a high-end graphics card that recently cost $500 might soon be available for $475 to $490. Good news for anyone into gaming, creative work, or small-scale AI tools at home or in business. Japan's 30-year government bond yield has reached a record high of 3.20%, while the 20-year bond now sits at 2.65%. These jumps are signs that Japan's internal financial system is under pressure. At the same time, President Trump plans to impose a 25% tariff on Japanese-made vehicles starting in August, posing a direct threat to major car makers like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan. If you're thinking about buying a new Toyota, brace yourself. That price could climb by $1,000 to $2,000, depending on the model. But that's not all. Many U.S. financial institutions hold Japanese bonds as part of their international portfolios. As bond yields fall and risks rise, lenders may increase borrowing costs, raise insurance premiums, or tighten lending terms. Small changes that could trickle down into mortgage rates, car loans, or even credit card offers. In short, while these international issues might seem far away, they could soon show up in very real ways in your energy bill, your next tech upgrade, or your next trip to the car dealership.
American wheat exports are quietly vanishing from the world market, with over $700 million lost in just 6 months. What happens when a silent shift in global confidence reshapes the everyday reality for families and communities? In just 6 months, over $700 million in U.S. wheat value vanished, not from disasters, but from lost trust. Major buyers like the Philippines, Mexico, South Korea, France, and Italy quietly shifted orders to Canada. No protests, no disputes, just idle grain ships, overflowing silos, and in some cases, wheat burned in fields. As buyers disappeared, for everyday Americans, this silent export collapse hits hard. Farmers face uncertain futures, and rural communities see jobs, incomes, and small businesses vanish. The loss may not make headlines, but its impact is deeply felt. In towns where a missing overseas buyer means empty wallets at home. The issue goes beyond weather or price. Global buyers no longer trust the U.S. trade system's stability. Confusing customs, inconsistent paperwork, and fears of export bans are driving them away. In contrast, Canada offers a transparent, AI-driven system that tracks quality and coordinates logistics, documents, and insurance. Though U.S. wheat is cheaper, importers now pay more to avoid risk, seeing the system, not the wheat, as unreliable. Low prices no longer guarantee sales. For Americans, and this distrust erodes economic confidence. Farmers and shippers struggle to secure contracts and plan finances. As U.S. reliability fades, banks, suppliers, and rural businesses feel the strain. Stability, once the backbone of prosperity, is now just a memory. Canada has redefined global agricultural trade by delivering timely, standardized shipments with precise documentation. It has earned the trust of markets like the Philippines and the EU. Canadian wheat exports to the EU have risen 40%, with France and Italy shifting 45% of former U.S. orders to Canada. In Mexico, Canada built inspection and packaging centers to meet local import rules, pushing out U.S. wheat entirely. For American communities, This means lost opportunities and rising competition. Jobs, investment, and export-driven growth are shifting north, leaving once thriving towns facing uncertain futures as global buyers turn elsewhere. For many American farmers, the crisis is all-encompassing. Credit lines have tightened, loans for new equipment are denied, milling plants are closing and unsold, wheat stocks are piling up, the logistics network has been disrupted, rail routes canceled, silos left unmaintained, and planting plans for next season put on hold. The ripple effects go far beyond the farm. Banks are wary of lending, supply stores see dwindling sales, and entire communities question their economic futures. The trusted American agricultural brand, built over a century, is now overshadowed, not by poor product but by unpredictable policy and unreliable systems. As families reconsider their ties to farming, the foundation of rural America is being tested in ways not seen for generations.